Here we go. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of DEI in 5. This is a live episode. I'm Adrielle. If we have not met, thank you for joining me. I'm the host of DEI in 5. I am also a diversity, equity, and inclusion thought partner, and I'm joined today on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn Live with the infamous Karen Young, aka the professional adult, aka Baldy Einstein. You want to give the people a little intro, a little background? And I'm sorry, TikTok, y'all can't see her, but that's what we got. You can go
That's
follow
fine.
us on YouTube or
Hey, actually, hey,
LinkedIn.
if you follow me on the professional adult, get my
Yes.
numbers up, then you'll be able to see.
Oh
Look,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
look
So
at
you have
that.
to have at least 1,000 folks on TikTok to go
Yes,
live, which is a little annoying. But introduce
yes, but
yourself.
hey.
Tell the folks who you are.
Hi, so my name is Karen Young. I am the president and founder of the Professional Adult, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy based out of Chicago, Illinois. And I am focused on building management, people who are moving into management from being individual contributors, and also helping organizations use agile methodologies to build diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives.
Yes. So today's discussion, and also shameless plug for us, we are together also the co-founders of DEI in a Box, which is ever evolving. As of now, it is a suite of e-courses designed to help folks that are working in the DEI space just explore frameworks, learn approaches, all that good stuff. But we are actually in the very early stages of exploring a startup, creating a product. There is, for any of you out there that are software engineers, and if you're interested, there is a job post that is linked on both of our LinkedIn pages right now. We are looking for a partner to help us build the technical side of things because that we don't do.
Yeah,
And so it's still open. I think we'll close it probably tomorrow. We've had a good number of applicants. So yeah,
yeah,
it'll be
yeah.
open for another day or so and we'll close it. So check that out. But without further ado, today, what are we talking about? So, y'all know the affirmative action decision happened not too long ago, a few months back. The decision to essentially get rid of affirmative action. And it's so interesting because when it happened, everyone was like, oh, well, we don't have to worry too much. That just has to do with schools and higher ed. So we thought, y'all thought, right? So here we are. I think it was yesterday, the article came out to announce that conservative activists, and I will use air quotes around activists because, I
Well,
mean,
I mean, you know, he is an activist, but what he is an activist for is terrible.
yeah, I have to cringe, right?
Yeah.
So, conservative activist, his name is Edward Blum. He has been known for challenging affirmative action in college admissions for some time. But he and his group, the American Alliance for Equal Rights, and you just have to laugh at that name as a nonprofit for what they're
Hmm.
doing. But his nonprofit is now suing two major corporate law firms over their diversity fellowships, and these are law firms that have been around for quite some time. They have worked in the DEI space for some time. I was, doing a little research before I hopped on. The two firms are Perkins Coie and Morrison and Forrester. And I just watched, as I was doing my research, Perkins Coie, they have a YouTube video talking about their diversity programs from 11 years ago. So they are not new to this game. They've been doing this.
Hmm.
But in this suit, Edward Blum and the American Alliance, I don't know whoever else is on his team, it might just be him for all we know. But they are alleging that the diversity fellowships at these two law firms, Perkins Coie and Morrison and Forrester, are excluding applicants due to their race. So far, we've heard back from Perkins Coie, and they are defending their diversity commitment, which is no surprise. Like I said, there's a YouTube video where they talked about their diversity initiatives from 11 years ago. They've been doing this work for some time. Whether or not they've been doing it well, I can't speak on that. I don't know, but at least they've been trying, right? And
Right.
then so far, last I checked, Morrison and Forster has not responded to the lawsuit. The lawsuits are a part of a much wider campaign against diversity initiatives in the private sector specifically. So, again, this is not just affecting universities and higher ed. This is now much sooner than a lot of people thought affecting corporations and organizations. And this is just the first phase. So, again, If you missed it, the Supreme Court ruled recently, not long ago, against this essentially having banning college admissions from taking race into consideration,
Mm-hmm.
and so that is now targeting, actual organizations and targeting the employment section of the private uh, of private organizations. So both of these lawsuits, let me just check my notes really quick to make sure I'll give you all the tea. But both of these lawsuits are seeking restraining orders and permanent injunctions to end the fellowship programs, these DEI programs. It is a known fact that the legal industry, heck, if we're being real, most industries have struggled with diversity, particularly with the lack of representation of Black legal professionals, attorneys specifically. And so we have for some time, and honestly, since DEI was a thing, has been implemented. If we even go all the way back to affirmative action, there have always been people pushing back on DEI. Like lately, there have
Yep.
been all these, oh, anti DEI, DEI is dead. I keep saying it, and I'll say it over and over, screaming from the mountaintops. DEI will not die as long as you have people. A lot of people
Yeah.
don't understand what DEI even means, what we do. But as long as you have people that are from different backgrounds and experiences, and I'm not just talking about race or ethnicity, but all backgrounds and experiences, from socioeconomic differences, religious backgrounds, what languages you speak, your physical abilities, disabilities, as long as you have people coming into a space like a academic institution or a workspace, and you expect them to work together on some sort of shared goals, you are going to need DEI. You can't expect
Yep.
people, diverse people, to come together and just all of a sudden work in harmony. That's not how life works. So that is why DEI is not going anywhere as long as you need people. We can always go down the rabbit hole of like talking about AI replacing jobs and all of that. In my opinion, that is not going to be a mass thing anytime soon. AI still needs people. It has a lot of flaws. AI has been around for some time, as we talked about in a previous episode. Check it out, it's linked. But I say all that to say that DEI is not going anywhere. People are pushing back on it for a number of reasons. Yeah, I'll pause there, but I just wanted to give you all the rundown of why we're here and what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and piggybacking on that, I mean, we know at least this iteration of how we talk about DEI has been around at least since the 90s.
Yep.
It's been called political correctness. It's been called diversity training. It's been called cultural competencies. It's been called all sorts of things. The name has changed, the concept hasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And again, connecting everything from 2016 with the UT case, where it was trying to strike down affirmative action in colleges and universities the first time, and then now with this Harvard case in 2023, and then now with this case with these law firms, it's the same thing.
Yep.
Because the goal is they really don't want to have the playing field leveled. And so that is one of the goals, and that has been the goal that Edward Bloom has had literally since the 90s. Please look him up. Please
Mm-hmm.
look into his association. Like, this has been his bee in his bonnet since the 90s. And he's just really happy that now we're in a cultural climate where it's now being more accepted than it was, say, even 6 years ago.
Right.
So like the issue that we're finding is not necessarily an issue of affirmative action per se. This is really judicial activism. This is an activist court, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
where the goal is, hey, we just want to make sure that everything is the status quo. And I think what it ultimately rolls down to, and this might be slightly controversial,
Mm-hmm.
is that we're finding that as we continue to open the playing field, as we continue to open doors wider to give people opportunities, what we're finding are those who did not have opportunities before, who have been marginalized in whatever ways, to see how much work they've gotten to at least get to where they are now. Once you start opening the gate, these people are now starting to jump leaps and bounds ahead of other people. And what we're finding is a lot of people who have been in positions on top are now realizing that they're just pretty mediocre. And because of that, it's easier to change the system than it is to realize you're just not as good as you thought you were.
Yeah.
And so I think, and this is again, this is Karen Young's opinion. I think that what is under the entire heart of all of this affirmative action is not just a return to the way things were, but it is the deep and abiding realization that, oh my gosh, if I let all of these marginalized groups who have been held down for so long, if I put them actually on a playing field, I will actually have competition.
Yep.
And if I actually have competition, I may not come out on top. So let me
Mhm.
just change the rules instead.
Yep. It's so interesting. A couple things as you were saying that, and per the usual, we're typically aligned on these types of things, but a couple things that came to mind. One is the ongoing shift in demographics of America. Like the racial and ethnic makeup of the US is shifting very quickly, almost faster, I think, than was predicted. There are a lot of studies, especially from Pew Research Center, that talks about
Mm-hmm.
this. And I think that has some people shook, right? And
Absolutely.
and the thing is, despite the overall makeup of or demographic makeup of our country changing and white people specifically becoming less of the majority, despite that, people in leadership are still majority white. And so I think exactly what you were just saying, like there's this, oh my gosh, like this change, the shift is coming and people are panicking. There's a lot of research out there. Y'all gonna hear me talk a lot about research if you're new to this. There's a lot of research out there that talks about psychological threat. And so there are different types of psychological threat that people, especially in the majority group, mostly white people, experience. And they kind of go into this panic. And so I think this is one of those moments we're seeing right now. I mean, these lawsuits specifically against these two law firms are alleging a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Like,
And isn't that just
what?
deliciously ironic? The deliciously ironic.
The very legislation meant to protect the rights of people that were freed from slavery, black people, is being used right now in we're almost in 2024 right now
Yeah.
to claim racial discrimination by companies that are trying to correct and mitigate inequity. And we didn't even touch on it, but this same person and his organization, again, I'm convinced it's just him, but maybe there are people back there, I don't know. But recently, I don't know if you were following this, filed a suit against the what is it called, the Fearless Fund, which is a black
Mm-hmm.
woman owned venture capital fund, and for the same reasons. And it's unreal. Like, I mean, if we can't, again, a whole other conversation needs to be had talking about the lack of diversity and specifically representation of black people, black women, because we going we're all the way down in VC is like non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
And it hasn't improved. We've seen some spikes when it's like, oh, it looks like it's getting better. Now we're back at square one. And
Right. And I think my biggest question is, and I try not to ask this in a cheeky sort of way, but to
mhm,
truly understand, um, what are you afraid of? Like truly, what are you afraid? Like it's on one hand, there is such a drive for competition and letting the market decide and letting the market determine who is best,
sure.
but you're doing everything in your power to ensure that that can't happen. So my
Mhm.
question is, what are you afraid of? You can't have it both ways. If you're such a free market advocate, and these people are very quick out of one side of their mouth to talk about how much they're free market advocates, and it's like, sure, great, I love that for you. Then why are you afraid of the free market? And that's something that I even I ask people who have these questions. And again, having a background in the social sciences, like I want to understand the subtext and the meanings behind things.
Yeah.
And that's an answer that I never seem to be able to get, is
Mm.
what are you afraid of? Why are you afraid of the competition? If you truly are better than these marginalized communities, and if you truly think that they're only getting to where they are because they're getting additional help, then you're still better. It wouldn't matter
Mm. Mhm.
unless the
Mhm.
answer is you're not, and you're afraid that they're getting extra help, which will put them on top of you.
Yep. Yep. Someone on TikTok, CJ the exec, said what they're afraid of is and has been obvious for 400 plus years. I mean, my take on it is there is a fear of loss of power. To me, I think
Mm.
it's that simple. I think people fear losing power, um, and power that has been held for so long.
But
Um,
I think that there's even a layer underneath that, and again, I'm
mhm,
making sure like we're tying it. Like I think there's a layer underneath that. Even being afraid of the loss of power, the
mhm,
question becomes, what are you afraid of? Like, yes, even if you lose power, man, we've had power shifts for eons.
sure.
What, and I think ultimately the answer is you're afraid that marginalized communities are going to do to you what you've been doing to marginalized communities, and because you know how wrong it is, and you know
Yeah.
how terrible it is, and you're afraid that, oh my gosh, if I cede this power, people are going to do the same for me.
Oof. I don't know why, but that made me. Well, I do know why, but it just made me think. I don't know if you saw this, but there was because the internet is whew, the internet is the internet. But there was this
Yeah.
this video of this woman being arrested. I don't know if you saw this, and she's like, "You're treating me like a black teen." Did you see that? And that
No.
is it stuck with me for a while. I saw this a couple of weeks ago. And she was arrested for reckless driving. I think she may, don't quote me here, but I think she might have been intoxicated or had
Under the
consumed some
influence of
substance
something.
under the influence of some sort, and she was like driving recklessly. She got pulled over, and they ended up arresting her and putting her in the back of the police car. And she is on camera. I think they had some, like, the wearables or whatever, and she pretty much was like, "You're treating me like a black teenager," and I'm just like, wow. So people see it, so you know what's going on, right? And
Hmm.
you even in this instance say it out loud.
Yeah.
um and yeah, I think that ties into what you're saying. There's that fear of, like, what if there's retaliation? What if something,
Right.
what if they
Well,
actually do something?
and I think marginalized communities and Black folks in particular have been so wildly gracious that there hasn't been any retaliation. But I think that, like, even kind of
Mississippi
going
said
back,
otherwise.
right? But I think even kind of going back to just kind of how this affects corporations, and kind of how this change kind of affects. I think again there is that fear of, well, if we cede that power, if we give this up, then, oh, you're not going to hire any white people anymore. You're not going to, and again, I think that that fear is so
Hmm.
limiting and so small, and I am concerned that organizations and companies do have such a lack of imagination and such a lack of foresight that instead of having the, trying to find a work safe word for this, instead of having the strength, I'll say, uh,
Hmm.
to truly abide by their beliefs and to truly abide by what they stand for. And again, we all know the research about how DEI actually is good for business. I mean, it's almost become a trope at this point. Like we
Yeah.
all understand.
Yes.
However, when it comes down to it, and even though you have the data and you have the research to back it up,
Hmm.
I think organizations just need to not be so fearful. And I think that what Edward Bloom and his organization are really trading on, and what they're really being successful on, is they're being successful on the concept of the fear of it, instead of organizations standing up and saying, no, no, this
Yeah.
is like, yes, it's not just morally the right thing to do, it is also financially and business wise the right thing for us to do. So you take your bigotry and you just scuttle off somewhere else.
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
that was really hard for me to keep that work safe, y'all. That was really hard.
You know, I it's fun. As an aside, I think one day, if you're open to it, I would love for us to do a conversation about just like the restraint it sometimes takes. Um, I was talking to. I currently have a coach right now because I'm going through a coaching program, which I have my feels about it. But but the coach, the people in the program are great. The logistics, hot mess. But the person that is my coach right now is great, and we were just talking about things I'm trying to solve for right now. One of the things I find myself struggling with sometimes is feeling like I have to censor myself when I'm working in the DEI space. So I feel like we should maybe do because I feel like we both do that so often where we're like, give me a second to word this.
Yeah.
And it gets exhausting because sometimes I just want to say how I feel. Sometimes I need to take off my DEI cap, even though I am a whole person and there's no separation. But sometimes I need to take off my DEI cap and just share my experiences as a Black woman with a lot of lived experiences dealing with inequity. Um, and that's tough because I
Yeah.
don't always want to censor myself. But to your point, yeah, I think in terms of corporations, I just some days I don't even know what to say or what to think because
Mhm.
so many times I've worked with companies, with organizations, and I work mostly with leadership, right? I tend to work
Mhm.
mostly with executive leaders, board members, founders of tech startups, all that good stuff. And they'll sit there and to my face and to the face of their employees, they're like, we're dedicated and we're going to do all this stuff and we're going to invest. And sometimes they do. They start off that way and then things just kind of trickle off.
Mhm.
Um, I've been reading a book called No Point B, which was written by my co host on my other podcast, Leadership. If you're not subscribed, check it out, Caleb Gardner. Um, and Caleb's cool people because he keeps it real. I appreciate him so much. Like I'm learning a lot about him in this book, which has been cool. But one thing he called out was like, yes, a lot of times people will want to do the right thing. They want to say the right things, but at the end of the day, the bottom line is what they're going to prioritize over
Mhm.
any of this human good stuff. And I really struggle with that because I'm like, what part don't people understand or can't they sort of wrap their head around with the fact that like your organization cannot run without people, without your people?
Well, I think that's where I actually fundamentally disagree with Caleb. That yes, people look at the bottom line, but humans are rational creatures at their very core. And
Mm-hmm.
because humans are rational creatures at their very core, we actively do things that go against our bottom line all the time because we feel a certain way about it.
Well, he
And I
might not
think
have
that
said
goes,
bottom line, but like for the like preservation of the company, like make sure we
oh,
stay afloat
oh
and
no,
like
yeah,
don't tank.
I completely understand, but I
Yeah.
still, my point
Yeah.
still stands. We make irrational choices in business all the time, and we make emotional, irrational choices in business all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And because again, the rational choice would be you cannot have a business without having people.
Mm-hmm.
If your people are unhappy, they're not going to work, which will impact your bottom line. That's a very linear way of thinking about things.
Sure.
Now tell me how many business decisions, how many industries are created to negate that the gaps in that linear thinking. Like frankly, as consultants, that's why we exist.
Right.
Because
Right.
people create irrational thoughts within that linear line. And so
Right.
I fully understand, like and again, how many years have we talked about, and everybody from McKinsey all the way down to universities, all the way down
Mm-hmm.
to organizations have spent decades talking about how having a diverse and inclusive organization is financially profitable for your organization. Yet here we are right now having this conversation.
Yeah.
The rationality would be this actually is good for my bottom line. Why would I do something against this?
Mm-hmm.
But yet we're sitting here right now having this conversation talking about organizations being too fearful to do it otherwise. So, yes, organizations do look to prioritize their bottom line, but they do so only within the scope of the irrationality of them as humans.
Mm.
And so I
Yeah.
think that that's why you still have to counteract and that's what we talk about when we talk about building the business case for DEI. That's why we always have to talk about it as a two-step process. Yes,
Yeah.
there's the rational financial version of it, that it is good for business, but then we also have to talk about the fact that it is the right thing to do.
Right.
And so we always have to play with both of those because if you just talk about the one, humans are irrational, so it's not going to
Right.
matter.
Right. That's so true. Question from TikTok: how can DEI have real value if the soul and mindset of the people in power doesn't change?
That is the big question. Yeah, like that is the big question. And so there's two approaches that a lot of people are taking, and I think ultimately the goal is how do you override the irrationality of humans?
Yeah.
And then there are a couple of ways of doing that. You can either appeal to authority that, hey, you can be the leader in your field by doing something. That was a lot of what happened in like 2020,
Mm-hmm.
2021. You can also appeal to um, being the caretaker. Actually, that happened a lot in 2021, where it's like, you know, you just want to show just how big of a heart you have. So that's one appeal. You can appeal to authority. You can
Sure.
appeal to the bottom line. And that's all kind of a top-down approach. Like that's the, leadership saying, hey, this is how you can show that you're the cool kid in the room. I think,
Mm-hmm.
however, what is a more effective approach is actually a bottom-up approach.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tougher approach, but we see it in the approach of the return to work and how that is kind of faltering. And we all know why return to work is actually happening. It has nothing to do with the work. It's the fact that offices are expensive.
Yep.
Um, but we're finding that pushback is happening from the bottom up. People are just saying no.
Mm-hmm.
And because people are saying no and it is impacting the actual work itself, then leaders are making adjustments accordingly. So I think that while there are two approaches, I think the more effective one is bottom up. The problem with the bottom up approach is that it is significantly more difficult and it requires longer term commitment from those people at the bottom up. And a lot of people who are doing the bottom up approach are people who are already marginalized. And if they're
Mm-hmm.
already marginalized, I'm tired. I really don't want to add one more thing I have to do on top of all the other things I have to do.
Yep. And for those of you that are less familiar with like kind of what we're talking about in terms of bottom up, we're talking about like individual contributors. So people that are just coming in, doing their job. They're not necessarily managing other people. Often they might be part of a DEI committee or an employee resource group. Those are usually the starting point. It could even be grassroots. Even, some people do book clubs and they're like promoting DEI through that method. But I agree. I think the bottom up approach is necessary. I think that we need both, right? At the end of the day, and then even the middle, right? Because in the middle is truly the most important, which is what Karen specializes in. Shameless plug. Check out the professional adult. But the
Yes.
middle managers are are just so essential, and I think so many organizations fail to give them the attention that they need because they are serving as the liaison, the connector between top level senior executives who are usually out of touch with what's going on with individual contributors, how they're interacting with clients, and all that stuff. They usually don't even know a lot of their problems and issues or even their strengths. And then you've got individual contributors who are usually like, well, why did senior leadership make this decision? They don't have any context more often than not why changes happen or why decisions are made. So you still have these middle managers who are the messengers for both parties and who often, if they don't have any professional development or formal training, don't usually know what to do or how to manage other people, especially people who have different backgrounds than them. That's where a
Yes.
huge challenge comes in. So I think, yes, we need both. And I know, I talk to so many people, especially ERG leaders and members of ERGs, and they're like, we're burnt out, we're tired. And I hear them. I get it. I've been there. It's
Yeah.
frustrating, but I think there has to be work done on all fronts because otherwise we're not going to get there. Because you can do all the work from the bottom line side of things, but if the decision makers at the top are like, no, we're not giving resource, or
Yeah.
no, we need to pile more work onto you, so you don't even have time to do that.
Hmm.
What can you do?
Right. Yeah,
And
or, or my personal favorite, we have to focus on billable hours.
billable freaking
We have
hours.
to focus on billable hours.
Yeah. Or they'll be like, oh, well, if you want to just do a little, little add on, you think I'm about to stay here past these 60 hours that I already worked to try to convince you why you should value and respect people like myself and that don't fit the majority. No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Um, but I think what's really interesting, and again, shameless plug, I'm going to plug my podcast leadership on here today because we talked about the return to office situation and retention yesterday. We had a guest speaker, so check it out. But just thinking about how people, you were just mentioning it, like these companies are trying to force people back into the office. It really is because it's expensive. A lot of these companies are in these major cities. There was one, Morgan Stanley. They've been trying to push for this 5 day a week in office situation, but they just reinforced
Mhm.
the policy.
Yeah.
But now we're in a situation where people have had so much visibility to how other people work because of the pandemic, because we are all locked down and we're like, well, what y'all doing over there? How are you working? Right. And so now we
Yeah.
have more transparency, more visibility into how other people have worked. And so people aren't willing to accept a lot of this stuff. Right. And
Mm-mm.
so it's like, why am I going to stay here and be forced to commute into office 5 days out of week, lose like let's say 2 hours out of my day because I'm standing on the train
Easily.
easily,
Easily.
and I could just go find another role somewhere else where I might have to go in 2 or 3 days a week. Heck, I might want a remote job. Maybe I'm someone who is introverted and I experienced a ton of microaggressions when I was working in the office and I don't want to go back because I work better at home.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't I go find something else? Like we are still in a reshuffling for sure, in corporate America, and I don't know when
Absolutely.
it's gonna end. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I also, well, you know me, again, my product brain is always producting. So I want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that we're kind of tying back our original topic. And I know people
Yes.
are always going to ask, okay, so what do you do about it? Um,
Yes.
the so what, who cares, if you will. So I've been thinking about this a little bit and then doing some reading about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so knowing that this trickle effect is happening, it started with colleges and universities. It is now starting to hit larger law firms. And again, what happens at the academic and government level does tend to trickle down into industry and corporate.
Yep.
So what do you do?
Yep.
I think the first thing you do is document what you're already doing. Because if somebody comes and says, well, you're being discriminatory, blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
like the first law firm, document the fact you've been doing this for 11 years. That this is not something that you just started to do. And then document the results and the metrics that you currently have. One of the other outputs of DEI that I think a lot of people don't realize, which I think is a fantastic output, is that by looking at how you can create an inclusive organization, you're also standardizing your process. And you're also making sure that your process is truly equal across the board. Even if it has nothing to do with race, gender, orientation, veteran status, et cetera, you're standardizing your process. So you're making it easier for you to not get in trouble later on down the road.
Yep.
So if you're looking at your hiring process and you're now making your hiring process more inclusive, that also means your hiring process is now standard. And by making sure that is now recorded and that is now set, if somebody tries to come and says your process is discriminatory, it's like, actually, no, it's not. Here's how this
Mm-hmm.
process is open to everybody. We are widening the door, not lowering the bar.
Yep.
Secondly, what you should do is to, again, look at what is and what isn't working and start to strengthen up what isn't working. So first, formalize and write down your process. Look at what isn't working. It's time to start going back and doing audits, which kind of makes me shudder a little bit because I really hate doing audits. I really hate doing audits. But this would be a good time to start doing audits,
Mm-hmm.
um, because this would be a really good time to start looking at, hey, it's now been a few years. What's working? What isn't? What do we need to change? What do we not need to change? If you are working in an agile way, like diversity
Mm-hmm.
as a product,
Mm-hmm.
you can start doing those things. The third thing that I would do is, besides writing everything down, doing an audit, is to have courage. Have courage. When someone tries to come to you with this nonsense, and if it doesn't actually align to where your organization is, tell them it doesn't align to where your organization is. You're fine. Keep it pushing. Don't be afraid to counter sue. Don't be afraid to be the big bad wolf every so often.
Mm-hmm.
These organizations who are activists and these organizations who are regressive are looking for people to be afraid. So don't be afraid. So I think that those are just three things right off the bat that every organization can do, no matter how large or small, to kind of ensure themselves against something like this coming down the road.
Yep. And I know the only thing I'll add here is I know that larger organizations tend to pretty frequently check in with their legal teams. If you are a smaller or mid sized organization and you have not done that, this is the time. Like, you need to check in. If you have a contract lawyer or whoever that person is, or you have a full legal team, this is the time to have them to collaborate with them, partner with them, review your current hiring processes and procedures. everything from start to finish. When we talk about hiring, we're talking about everything from, your job descriptions, making sure that the wording is legal there, and inclusive there. We're talking about the actual hiring process when you're interviewing people, how you're actually considering them. So, are you using rubrics? Have them review everything, even as far as the onboarding phase, like all of the
Yeah.
steps that people go through when they're onboarded. Is it fair? Is it equitable? Because I can't tell you how many people, especially marginalized folks that I've spoken to, and during onboarding, there's something like, oh, you're the diversity hire, or something egregious or microaggressive that potentially is harmful.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure what to look out for, reach out to someone, find someone. We are here as a resource as well if you want us to connect you to legal folks, or if you just need help building out these processes and procedures, reach out to experts. There are people out here to help. So
That's right.
all those things. But yeah, I think those are great tips. I mean, I think as far as corporate goes, I think this is just the beginning. I mean, there were letters that were sent out to tech companies as well. I'm not sure. I was trying to find it. I'm not sure if it was Edward Blum's group that sent those letters out or if it was another group. I
Wouldn't
almost
be
want to say it
surprised.
was, I think it was Republican AGs, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm.
Um, I'm gonna have to find it, but yeah, there have been some. I wouldn't call them threats, but just some letters saying like, "Hey, we need you to turn it down with your DEI initiatives." And so I think again, this is just the beginning. I think we're going to continue to see this. Yes, a month ago, Fortune 100 companies are getting sworn by Republican AGs using the Supreme Court affirmative action as a lever into the workplace. So
Yep.
yeah, again, people were really convinced that this was going to stay kind of centered around education, but we're seeing that it's quickly expanding into corporations. We're talking decades long law firms that have been around for a long time, long time. So that's pretty telling to me. I think we're also going to continue to see this effect on who's hired too into workplaces. I mean, we kind of hinted at it, but people are not willing to take a lot of the BS in these workplaces. And
Yeah.
um, I think in terms of like seeing diversity in leadership, I want to be hopeful, but this certainly isn't helping. So,
Yeah.
and I don't
It's
blame
it's
people
hard.
for leaving.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard to be hopeful when you see all of the progress that has happened over the past 30 years. Again, this is not a 2020 issue.
Right.
Like I remember in undergrad talking about these issues,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in undergrad a while ago, um, talking about these issues, and to see all of the work that's been done for 20 and 30 years be just
Yep.
pulled back just because some folks are in their feelings about it.
Yep.
It is disheartening. It's disheartening.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. Trying to keep hope alive, as they say.
Yes.
Well, we're still here. We're still in it. We're still pushing forward. Again, we will continue to have conversations much like this one around current events, topics related to DEI. If you are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Yeah.
Yeah.
What
And
else?
y'all follow me on TikTok. It's the professional adult, so we can both do a
Yes.
live together. That'll be fun.
Yes,
It'll
follow
be a thing.
Karen on TikTok. She is
Yes.
at the professional adult. She's that on pretty much all platforms. So
Yes. Yes. If
follow her
if there's
there.
anything I have learned from my background in advertising is reduce friction by doing the same thing on all
Yep,
platforms.
exactly.
Um, yeah, and I always want to give Adriel a shout out for of the two of us being so much more willing and desirous of doing any of the social media stuff. Like I am much more likely to be in the corner writing and working on stuff than ever being on social for anything. So kudos
Yeah.
to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a struggle. I'm still getting the I don't know. Of all the platforms are fine except for YouTube, which is the one that I'm trying to build in because I'm still not at the point where I can run ads on my videos because I still haven't hit
Mm,
the hours threshold. So go check out my other videos. Y'all help me run that clock up. But the trolls on there, I mean, that's how you got the name Baldy Einstein, but they are
it is.
relentless. I mean, People have emailed me to send me things or DM'd me, and I'm just like, how do people have the time? So if y'all have any positive feedback or comments that you'd like to share, especially on YouTube, please share them.
Yes. Yes.
Please do. Any last thoughts before we wrap up today?
No, I don't think so. I think maybe the only thing is I challenge everyone to have courage. Have courage. It is going to be a long slog, and those who are regressive and want to continue to take away our progress and our rights are hoping that we get tired, and they're hoping that we are afraid. Don't let them. Don't let them win.
Drops mic. All right. Well, that's my final thought too. I love it. Again, follow Karen across all platforms, The Professional Adult. You can follow me across all platforms. I'm super meta, just at Adrielle Parker on everything. Can't get it wrong. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing y'all back here next week. I think same day, same time, Thursday,
I think
12
so.
p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
If you have any topics that you'd like us to cover, please let us know. We are always open to suggestions, but
Mhm.
otherwise, we will see y'all soon. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Bye.